Don't know, I'm the better half of the Ogden boys. Good to be here tonight. Thank you. We would like you to kind of just settle in and make yourself comfortable. A little intro music, Lenny, if we could. We are about to take you on a journey down memory lane. We'll be stopping along the way to visit with some very unusual characters and relive some very special moments of Helen, Beatrice, Heemseth, Ogden, Fedroff. For Mom, this is your life. Come on up front here. Nice round of applause. Right here at the throne of honor. Now I should tell you, just before we started this, my mother sensed something was going on and she took me aside and she said, "David, if you embarrass me in front of all these people, I'll kill you." But what are sons for? It all started on Thursday, December 21st, 1922. She was the first child of John and Ethel Heemseth and was born in Brooklyn, New York. Her father, John, soon moved up the ranks of the Federal Reserve Bank, and they moved to the beautiful suburb of Hillside, New Jersey. Helen and her younger sister, Jane, grew up in a very beautiful house. Let's listen in on a voice from her past.
I'll never forget those balmy summer nights when, very late, I used to quietly shimmy up the Nico tree, which separated the houses in Hillside, and stare at young Helen and Jane as they prepared for bed. I knew what I was doing was wrong. Helen and Jane were my best friends, but there was some compelling force which made me keep climbing that tree. I guess it was just the overwhelming beauty of the Heemseth girls.
Yes, Mom. Yes, we know who it is. Let's bring her out with a nice round of applause. Virginia Butch Dykeman. Come on out here. There she is, Mom, straight from the ginkgo tree. God, it brings back memories, doesn't it? All right, let's continue down our path. Every summer, Helen and Jane would spend their vacation up on Meredith's farm in Wallkill with Etsy, Minnie, and Hermie, and a whole host of characters. Let's bring back some of those Wallkill memories.
We've no more, my mother. Your girls are up in Wallkill now. They're far away from harm. They're safe on Meredith's farm. Mother, the sweat runs down your brow. You came up here to have a real good time with Minnie and Etsy, and everything is fine. So can you imagine, Mother? Your girls are up in Wallkill now.
Let's bring the Ogden brats out here. Nice round of applause. Come on out here, kids. Give her a big hug. All right, Lenny, he's just getting warmed up here, it seems like. And one of Helen's devoted friends from Wallkill is here with us tonight.
The thing I remember most about young Helen was how much she enjoyed life. Every summer, she and her sisters, Jane and cousin Doris, would come up to the farm. Well, as far as I'm concerned, both Jane and Doris might have just as well have stayed home. They simply came up each summer to have fun. Helen, though, was different. The very first time she came into the hen house, the chickens sensed something was different. I've never seen chickens react quite that way. Helen's presence seemed to somehow stimulate them. And during the summer of '32, those hens produced more double yolks than I could even count.
Yes, Helen, straight from Wallkill, New York. Let's bring out Flossie Yoakum. Come on, Flossie. There she is. This double yolk of 1957. She's being overwhelmed. We got a long way to go, Mom. After graduating high school, Helen decided she wanted to enter the business world. And to prepare her for that endeavor, she enrolled in the Catherine Gibbs Secretarial School. We are very lucky to have a fellow classmate here tonight.
God, how I hated Helen's guts. She not only had a dynamite figure, but she could type over 75 words a minute and roll her tongue in the shape of a cannoli. I was first introduced to her by a mutual acquaintance, Ann Travis. Ann had actually spoken fondly of Helen. God only knows why. Talk about a teacher's pet. Helen was the only one in Miss Blackman's steno class to pass the final exam. More than one person in class saw Helen bring Miss Blackman dental floss from her father's medicine cabinet. Talk about brown-nosing.
And yes, Helen, we know you recognize that voice. John, I've never seen Doris look this hot. Wow. A few years later, Helen met a young officer in the U.S. Navy, Clarence Buzz Ogden, and they fell in love and married, having 2 sons. The older son, John, was unfortunately born with a severe mental and physical handicap. While the younger son, Buzz's family lived in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, a seaside resort on the Atlantic Ocean. And every weekend, the Ogdens would hop in the station wagon and visit their relatives in Ocean Grove. We're very lucky tonight to have someone from neighboring Asbury Park.
I tell you, those Ogdens always struck me as being weird. I mean, they probably invented the word cheap. The old man Crawford was probably the worst. I remember one night he had just finished bowling with his buddies, and one of them asked to borrow $5. Well, old man Ogden almost wet himself laughing so hard. And that son of his, Clarence, how he was able to hook up with that gorgeous babe Helen, I'll never know. Every time she would come down to the lanes, all the pin boys would fight over to see who would set up her pins, just so we could be downwind of the ocean breeze, so the ocean breeze would blow the smell of her perspiration down the alley.
Yes, Helen, one of the pin boys at Ogden's Lanes in Asbury Park. Let's bring out Arnold Backup Ball Obranowitz. Come on, Arnie. Hey, Arnie, how about a hug for the lady? For the lady here. Living on Park Avenue in Cranford, New Jersey, the Ogdens developed many good friends and grew to enjoy many activities in the suburbs. They were churchgoers and belonged to First Presbyterian Church in Cranford. One of First Presbyterian's past employees was nice enough to travel all this distance, so let's listen in to another person from Helen's past.
I used to really look forward to the 9:30 service each Sunday morning at the First Presbyterian Church in Cranford. While everyone knew my cousin, not many people in the congregation knew me by name. I was simply known as a guy who played with the big organ. In fact, I tuned that big organ every Sunday morning for 27 years. I remember peering out from behind my organ each Sunday morning, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mrs. Ogden as she sat in the 5th pew. You know, she actually said hello to me once. And God, she had great legs.
Yes, it's Bob's cousin, Ernie Hairlip Longacre. Let's bring Ernie out here. He's such a lech. All right, moving right along. One thing that the Ogdens enjoyed doing as a family was occasionally going out to dinner. And of course, they had their favorite spots, which they frequented. And tonight, we have spared no expense by flying out a person from one such establishment.
1964, that was the year of the New World Fair, Lyndon Johnson's appendectomy. The Beatles were #1 on the charts, and it was the year I fell in love with tartar sauce. It happened innocently enough. I was having dinner alone on a Friday night at Howard Johnson's on Route 22 in Springfield when I noticed the people at the next table were consuming enormous amounts of fried flounder. And smeared all over the top of the steaming fish was the most gorgeous silky tartar sauce I'd ever laid my eyes on. Just when I thought the family was finished with their meal, the waiter brought over another huge platter of fish with gobs of creamy tartar sauce. I can tell you that it was because of that tartar sauce that I applied later that same evening for the waiter's job, and it wasn't long before I found out that that gluttonous family that night, and every Friday night, with a good-looking mother and 2 fat slob kids, were the Ogdens.
Yes, we don't even have to tell you who this is. I know the voice is so that familiar. Let's bring out the waiter at Howard Johnson's, Tiny Kowalski. Now, the Ogdens lived in Cranford for almost 20 years and developed some very meaningful friendships. Since Cranford was a rather small town, they also found themselves frequenting the same grocery, delicatessen, shoe store, and of course, the same pharmacy. In fact, many of the Ogdens' neighbors were convinced that Helen started working at police headquarters just to help pay the bills at one such drugstore. Let's see who was able to join us tonight.
I get the feeling that most people think it's boring being a pharmacist, and for the most part, I guess they would be right. However, every now and then it does get a bit exciting. It was a lot of fun before they put the condoms out by the register. Kids would have to come up to me and ask me for them. I used to make them repeat the request in nice and loud, and watch them squirm in front of the store full of customers. The other thing for me was watching old Buzz Ogden come into the store 5 to 6 times a week. By the amount he purchased, you would think he was opening his own drugstore. What the hell do you do with Campo Finique anyway? And I remember his wife, Helen, coming in at least twice a week. We all thought she was selling neosynephrine on the black market.
Yes, the pharmacist from Barron's Drugstore, Wilhelmina Trojan. Now, Helen had her hands full as a full-time secretary and mother of 2 growing boys, and it eventually took its toll on her physically. She developed some problems with her legs and finally decided to have the problem resolved surgically. Now let's listen in from our next guest from Helen's past.
Helen first appeared in my waiting room. Lydia, my nurse, warned me that she was a bit different. Little did I know how much. In all the years that I practiced in medicine, I had never seen a woman's eyes so closely match the color of her swollen varicose veins. I remember gazing into her eyes just before she lost consciousness with the anesthesia and thinking, wow, I must be in heaven. When I reached down and grabbed hold of those pulsating veins with the vice grips, I shuddered with excitement.
Yes, Helen. Do you remember that surgeon? Do you remember him? Straight from the Benai Brith Hospital, Dr.